Hey everybody, waitingfornextyear.com podcast. Jeff's on the line. Welcome back to Twitter, sir. You made it.
I was touch and go there for a little while. I was a little bit worried about myself.
But that last week, you said you were going to uninstall the rest of social media.
So I did. I got rid of Facebook and Instagram that last week. I didn't get rid of Snapchat just because it's not as much of a time suck. And I'll tell you, I didn't put those back on. I don't miss those at all. I found I was just compensating with those. Like, since I couldn't scroll Twitter, I just kept opening Facebook. I didn't even enjoy Facebook. So I don't miss those at all. They were just kind of replacement scrolls for me. So that's been good. How quickly, the morning of the 1st, did you install the Twitter app?
I still haven't installed it.
Oh, that's right. So you're just going on via mobile. You're just like signing in.
So what I figured out is that Twitter sucks me in the worst possible ways at the worst possible times, and that it takes away it scratches the itch of the take. So rather than doing 300, 400, 500 words for waiting for next year, I used to run my ideas out on Twitter so that I'd write a post later, and then I skipped the part where I was writing a post because I was like, oh, I'll just talk about it on the podcast, and then I started reducing the amount of podcasts I did, and then all of a sudden it's like I'm not doing content for waiting for next year at all anymore. I'm just tweeting.
Yeah, I found the same thing. It's very easy to reduce a blog post into a tweet or a small thread of tweets, like very easy. And so much get lost, and you can't provide the nuance, and you can't really make a strong argument. A lot gets lost in translation, but I still find myself doing that fairly often. And I agree that there are much better ways to communicate that, especially when we have a vehicle like waiting for next year at our fingertips. Not
to mention that you're less likely to get dragged into an argument when you write a 4 or 5 paragraph essay, 400 or 500 word post on waiting for next year. But people do comment, and sometimes they do want to fight you, but I'm not drawn in the same way. It doesn't notify my phone when somebody comments on waiting for next year. And quite frankly, I think the commenters on waiting for next year are they're pretty respectful. They kind of understand ground rules better.
And it does seem like when people comment on a blog post, they more lay out their argument. It's not a back and forth as much. There might be a little bit of back and forth, but there's not the need for escalation as much on a blog post as there is on Twitter.
So you're fully back. Have you changed the way you use Twitter? Have you changed the times that you use it? What were your ground rules for coming back after learning whatever it is that you learned being off for 3.5 weeks?
So I left it on like the third page of apps on my phone. I have an iPhone. And so I'm not as tempted. I don't open my phone and just automatically go to it. Like, just having to swipe over twice makes it enough work that I don't just do it constantly, which has been good. The ground rules I have are no politics. I thought that was a good one because nobody wants to read your political takes, right? I mean, in the sport, like you and I are mostly tweeting about sports and a little bit of pop culture and stuff like that. But for the most part, nobody's following us for our political takes. So
no, I do feel that I can add something occasionally when it comes to company news, economics, things of that nature, because that's a field I actually worked in. I would guess you probably feel the same way about marketing and advertising.
Yeah, and for me, it's more just like purely political stuff. If I'm just mad or just trolling something like that. If it's a news story, I don't mind doing that as much. But just pure politics, I'm trying to get rid of, and I'm also trying to get rid of just retweeting some writer and trashing. I mean, I think we talked about that. Yeah, with Chris Mannix, I got in a phase there where I was just quote tweeting everything he did and mocking it, and like that's not productive or good. So,
but I can't say like the next time. I can't say that the next time something like net neutrality shows up, or a merger acquisition, something that's vaguely political that I feel like is in my lane, that I won't kind of go there. The key is I want to stay in my lane, and I don't want to do what everybody else is doing. So if it's, how you feel about Trump or what happened in his cabinet, or etc., I just feel like that's covered elsewhere better. And that's not that I'm not entitled to have an opinion, but why should anybody care what my opinion is? I'm just going to pick my spots to where I think I add value.
Yeah, and I was getting trapped into the cheap retweets and the cheap comments and likes of just, commenting on some terrible thing that I thought was happening by some political party, and you get a couple of people that'll join in with you or give you a couple of likes, but you're not adding anything to the conversation. You're just part of the noise and part of the kind of outrage cycle that happens.
I kind of feel like I've gotten that philosophy, and I think I talked about it on the podcast over the last year when I listened to the Malcolm Gladwell podcast about the MIT graduate who didn't give his fortune when he made a fortune with his engineering firm. He didn't give it to MIT. He created an engineering school at a community college, I think in like PA or New Jersey, somewhere in that PA, New Jersey area, because that would make a much bigger impact by bringing engineering education to people who otherwise wouldn't have it, as opposed to raising the level of MIT, which is already so high level that they don't need any help. So like I stopped giving, as much as I love Boston University, they have nearly a $2 billion endowment. So I stopped giving them money because my voice and my money spoke louder at the Cleveland Food Bank, for example, or these different places. So I feel the same way with my words on politics now. Like, I'm going to wait until they have more value and place them there, as opposed to just kind of spitting them out and cheapening them by putting them wherever.
Right, and having those conversations with, either in person or in a setting that makes sense, or with people who have the ability to take some sort of action.
I talk to my wife more about politics now.
Yeah, like about just what's happening, because I'm not sitting online. I used to sit online and just rage tweet about it all day, and then when she would try to bring something up when I get home, I'd be like, I can't even talk about that.
I've already been there. I've spent 3 hours with it.
Right,
you're too late to this one.
Right, I've already been mad about that. I can't drum up. I can't do it again. I'm mad about something else now. It's
so ridiculous when you say it like that, but I've done it too. So I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing with you.
Oh, it's crazy. But I mean, that was the best thing about being on Twitter, is just being out of those rage cycles, which are just completely unavoidable. Right. And it's just people. It's like Hulk online, where just people. The secret is that you're just always mad, and it's just I couldn't get out of that fast enough. So not checking the timeline as much has been nice, because I've gotten less of that.
All right, so now we come back to Twitter, and we come back in our various capacities, and all of a sudden, a big, giant negative news story comes out and dominates the entire sports news scene. Urban Meyer placed on administrative leave, all this other stuff going on. And look, it's the easiest thing in the world to say that you're against domestic violence. We're all against domestic violence. And getting past that point and figuring out what it all means and what it all should happen is really complex, and everybody needed to have an opinion right away. And I felt very liberated not to have a take at all right away.
Yes, I 100% agree with that. And it was one of those where I tried to read
by the way, I
things.
am against domestic violence. I'll have you know.
I tried to read a couple things and try to educate a little bit, and it just seemed like the details were murky enough that you could make it not what you wanted. I mean, clearly it's a terrible situation, but it felt like one of those where everybody firing off takes in the immediate aftermath. A week later, we're going to find out so much more, and maybe they were right, maybe they were wrong, but there wasn't really a lot of value being added at that point. And yes, being away from that and not feeling the need to vomit my opinion all over the internet was certainly a little bit refreshing, and something I wouldn't have been able to do a month ago.
It almost made me feel bad for the radio guys that I was listening, who really did kind of have to react and try and make their way through it right away. And because they don't have a choice. They're sitting there, they've got a 3-4 hour slot to fill, sometimes 5 hours. I think Bull and Fox do 5 hours. And just to think about that, you've got to line up guests. You've got to lead them in with questions. You have to have takes that light up your phone lines. And this isn't me criticizing them. I'm just saying, like, I almost felt bad for them with this story, because it just felt like it wasn't, the whole thing doesn't feel ripe yet. It just doesn't feel like it's it's untold.
Yeah, and it's easy to do that, and the radio guys can fill time and play up a shtick and take a side that they can play up their opinion on if you're talking about Tyrod versus Baker and who should start week 1, right? Like that's
There are
when
no
they take
stakes.
it, right, but you can play up the extremes of it. And you can take a bold stance and you can ridicule people of the other side and all that. But to do actual commentary on a story that serious in the immediate aftermath just has to be incredibly difficult and dangerous, frankly, because you have to have these opinions about things that are very likely to, rub a lot of people the wrong way almost immediately.
The one thing that I did find interesting to talk about behind the scenes at Waiting for Next Year, and I think it's safe enough that we can bring it to the front, is just how different we're dealing with a situation like this in 2018 than we would have maybe 20 years ago, where Urban Meyer didn't commit any act of domestic violence. Like, he didn't actually do anything wrong in a lot of ways, in the way we would have looked at the story 20 years ago. We would have just stopped at blaming the guy who harassed and maybe committed violence against his wife/ex-wife and the mother of his children, and we would have been like, well, it's kind of ugly that the coach didn't fire him sooner or whatever else. But I think we would have stopped at the actual potential criminal, the committer of the act. And now and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, I just find it interesting that we've found our way to holding Urban Meyer and people at Ohio State almost more accountable than we do law enforcement.
Yeah, and that is definitely something that we did kind of talk about behind the scenes in this area where we want our sports leagues to be our judicial systems, and not that it's always wrong, and not that I don't want, if you truly knew and was just sitting on it, that's clearly something terrible, and whatever happens to him. But what about all of the cases where you're not a hugely famous football coach, and equating football games and wins and losses to these situations is just kind of gross and bad, and you wish that we could live in a spot where we're all yelling for the legal system to handle this instead of talking about wins and losses and what this means for a football team.
On top of it, is it only like this when the stage is under the spotlight, like Ohio State football, like a famous coach with athletes and coaches who get paid millions of dollars, or does this start to extend down? Thankfully, I have not had this situation, but I mean, I employ 20 plus people. If one of them gets a DUI, do I have to consider whether or not to keep them employed? Like, where does that end? At a certain point, I guess I do have to make that judgment call at a certain point, but it's like, it seems very strange. Should I be running that report on every one of my employees every year to find out if they've been arrested for something, they're keeping something from me? Like, it's in college football, what do they call that? Failure to control, or failure to, I can't remember what they call it. When you've failed in your overseeing of your own program.
Yeah, and to your point, it puts us all in a weird situation where we're all the kind of judge and jury for these things. And clearly we all don't have faith in the actual system that is supposed to be doing this, because it keeps popping up in our sports conversations and all this. And like I said, I hate equating it to sports in any way. And yet we almost have to, because if that somebody did something terrible and they're still out there playing, and obviously I'm talking about more than just the Urban Meyer thing. But, if an athlete has done something terrible or been a part of something terrible and they're still out there playing, it does feel gross. And it feels weird as a consumer and as a viewer to watch that. And that shouldn't be on us to feel like that. It should be on the legal system to step in where it's needed to step in. And clearly, as a society, we don't feel like that's happening enough, because we keep bringing it back into these other areas.
And the ultimate example, of course, is Ray Rice, where now we're trying to equate what he did with the number of football games that he's suspended for, which seems really, really silly. And
right. I mean, you're trading what is what is this woman's life worth? 4 games? Not life, but what
Well,
is
hang
her
on, Jeff.
well-being worth?
If
Four
because
games, 8 games?
if he holds her up against the wall by holding her neck without squeezing, that's 3 games. But if he squeezes and punches her, that's 5 or 6. I mean, this is the ridiculousness that we end up getting into, and I'm not trying to trivialize it. I'm just saying that I don't know how you do it.
No, we're not trivializing it. We're bringing up the fact that these situations are being trivialized by the fact that we equate them to sports, and it's terrible and it's gross, and it makes us all have to weigh these things that are just. It's you can't win that argument when you're asking how many games, how many sporting events somebody should miss for beating somebody or doing something. That's not a winning argument. There isn't a right answer.
Yes, you're either employable or you're not. And the one NFL player, I can't even remember his name, but Jerry Jones let him play for a minute. He's fighting MMA now in the UFC, and I laugh only because it's kind of ironic. But that guy turned out to be unemployable in the NFL, and that's really what we should be talking about. Either you're employable or you're not. And this guy, Zach Smith, had been deemed employable by Urban Meyer, and now all of a sudden he's not. But it's also kind of icky because it feels like maybe he's only unemployable because it got a spotlight put on it.
Right. And it does get harder with the Urban Meyer situation. With the player, the league should certainly step in and set those boundaries. But when it's a coach, especially an assistant type coach, then the head coach is really kind of judge and jury on that in terms of his employment. So, Urban Meyer has a bigger role on that. So it's just impossible. It's amazing is every week we've talked, it feels like there's a new story like this that has come out that we've discussed, and we've lamented how much we don't want to have to talk about it. Right? It feels like this just dominates the sports world at this point, where every week we're talking about something gross.
These things had to have been happening in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and just went unreported.
I mean, Jim Brown has a statue, and the stories about him aren't great. So I definitely think it's just kind of a change in the way we view things in society and how much weight we put on how much the sports world should get involved with it.
So I'm on record on this podcast saying that I didn't know quite how to react to that statue when I visited Brown Stadium with my kids and we were taking pictures everywhere and doing all these things. Because on the one hand, Jim Brown is the player my dad told me about who's the greatest football player in the history of the NFL. And on the other hand, he is a guy who's done I don't even think I have to say alleged to have done, has done some heinous things. But he's also been a savior to many, many young gang members in that realm. Nothing's clean. Maybe nobody should have a statue. Maybe that's really what we're talking about.
I mean, you could, and this isn't going to be popular, but you could make the same argument for Paterno. What he did was completely just disgusting and awful. But you also can't deny how many people he helped and the good that he did. And that's where these things get complicated. And we want to just make everybody a good guy or a bad guy. Those guys clearly, because of their bad stuff, net out on the bad side on this stuff. But it is more complicated than what I think we normally want to discuss when we talk about these guys.
No, and ultimately there's almost no comparison between Joe Paterno and Urban Meyer, but neither one of them actually committed the heinous act at the root cause of the reason we're talking about these issues at all. And that just goes to, I mean, obviously Paterno and Sandusky is the extreme example, and Urban Meyer and Zach Smith, but they're all in the same realm and scope. They all kind of live together and are related in a even in an offhand way.
Right. They're extreme versions of each other, right? It's the coach looking the other way when he knows something not great is going on, or just the boss looking universe. The other way. Right. And it's all very difficult to know where the boundaries are on that and how much we feel like as sports fans we need to get involved with it.
So the way that I've been looking at the Urban Meyer situation now, because he's not the one who committed the act, is that I almost think he could get out of it with proper PR. And I maybe that's disgusting. I'm not saying Zach Smith can get out of trouble for proper PR or that I'm not saying that, but I'm saying this this really seems like if he gets fired, that it's going to be because his PR was bad.
Yeah, because he didn't find a way to come out and talk about this and phrase it. And didn't he have a press conference where he lambasted this reporter and this idea of all this happening? That was his. I think that might be more of the undoing than the fact that it happened and he might have known, right?
Yeah, I'm still murky on all those details. I can't make heads or tails of what exactly he said and what exactly he's denying that he knew or anything else. And there are weird things going on the legal system with this case where the police department didn't admit that there had been an arrest and then later checked the box that there had been an arrest, and it's across different counties and states and time periods. I mean, the fact that there were multiple incidents going back from 2009 to 2015 makes it really confusing on a number of in a number of realms, because it's hard to believe that this guy was worth hiring by the time he showed up in Ohio. And also, it's hard to figure out, well, when did all these different incidents take place, because they're multiple over many years.
Right. And it's hard too because we know, especially college football, the power and the prestige that these guys have, and if they want something to disappear, a lot of times they can make that happen. And so your brain kind of instantly goes to that spot, at least mine does, of, all right, when the legal system is weird, when these things are disappearing, when the reports aren't happening the way they're supposed to, is there a reason for that? Were strings being pulled? And I'm not trying to start a conspiracy theory, but I just mean when we as fans start evaluating these situations, your brain goes to places where you fill in blanks that we shouldn't have to fill in, because again, we're not the legal system and we're not the ones who should be making these judgments. But it all gets very difficult when you think of that way. And sports have reached such a pinnacle in our society of importance that it makes it just very difficult, because these guys have so much power that when you see them abuse it, it just comes with that much more magnitude.
Yeah, and there's such a long track record of coaches making things go away for players, and even police departments and sheriff's offices kind of being in on it, for the benefit of the program, as it were. And so it is really hard. I don't know. I'm just not enjoying it. I'm not enjoying this at all. I know I'm not supposed to, but sports used to feel more fun than this.
No, I 100% agree with that. You just used to be able to turn it off. You just used to watch on the weekends or watch on game night, and then all of this other stuff didn't really happen unless you were really hardcore, right? Like this would have made the stories more, but the day-to-day kind of grind and a lot of those negative stories, you just wouldn't hear that much about. And maybe it's good we do, and maybe it's bad, but it's so all-consuming now that it just wears you down.
Yeah. That was part of what was so nice about stepping away from the stream of stories, because I didn't have to just live and die with every little iterative report on the story. You're not even that big of a Ohio State fan, are you? Are you?
No, I'm not really an Ohio State fan. I enjoy college football, but I'm more of just a turn it on the weekends, whatever the good games are. Turn those on. So that kind of surprised me, because not being an Ohio State fan, I figured I would join in the chorus and jump on my soapbox and get to feel good about myself by telling everybody I hate domestic violence. But the more you read about it, like you said, it just gets really murky and weird, and I didn't really feel comfortable commenting on any of it.
Well, I do want to congratulate you on your opinion that domestic violence is bad, because it takes a brave man to come out and stand behind. No, I agree. Everybody should have that opinion. It's funny how many people grandstand on it and are like, see, look at me.
Oh, every time any story comes out, people love to do that. And you lose any, Twitter's terrible for nuance, or just any sort of commentary. Sports commentary is bad for nuance, but we lose a lot by doing that as well.
So what else do we have here?
Indians trade deadline. Were you happy or sad?
I'm pretty happy. I don't know what people expected. The idea that the Browns shouldn't have kick the tires on trying to bring in Bryce Harper was funny to me.
I like that you said Browns. I like that. I like
Did I
the
say
Cleveland
Browns?
psyche.
Oh my
Yes.
goodness. I'm sorry. I'm watching the Ravens play the Bears on Thursday Night Football from Canton, and I'm just distracted. Sorry, Indians. Um, could you believe that that was a debate this week that it wouldn't be worth renting Bryce Harper?
No, I mean obviously I wanted Bryce Harper. I do think like the question of cost is very interesting when you get him for half a season and you've got you know Lindor here for what 4 seasons. Like I don't want to waste a single Lindor season. Is pretty much my goal for the Lindor years. I don't want to run into a Mike Trout situation. Um, what I thought was interesting was so we signed back on Twitter August 1st. So still getting all the in case you missed it tweets. How mad everybody seemed about the deadline, and it cracks me up how the deadline becomes its own sport. Because a couple of weeks before the deadline, it was, well, the Indians can't wait till the deadline. They need bullpen help. This is ridiculous. They need to be aggressive and go get bullpen help. So
And
they
they
traded
did.
a top 10 prospect in all of baseball for one of the best relievers in the game. Right? Hugely aggressive trade, massively aggressive trade. In terms of a baseball team, they're trying to win. That's about as aggressive as you get. Right? Because you're not going to trade anybody off your roster.
The kind of trade that we've now taken for granted in what year 3 of Antonetti without Mark Shapiro.
Right. And we just did this. Like we just did this with Andrew Miller like 2 years ago, and but everyone was so mad and saying that we didn't do anything at the deadline and that we weren't aggressive and that we weren't trying to win and all this stuff. And it just cracks me up how the deadline becomes its own animal because we made one of the most aggressive trades in all of baseball, probably. Right? I mean, we got a top 10 prospect, one of the best relievers in baseball. We were one of the winners of the deadline. That was a huge move. We're much better because of that. But because it happened like a week before the deadline, it just didn't count even a little bit. and we were right back to this is a sport. I want to win the deadline. It just cracks me up how drafts and deadlines become their own event that kind of live outside of actually, where you are with the team. And I'm not saying that the Indians didn't need to make moves or I didn't wish that they would have made more moves. But the criticism seemed to be mostly about them not doing anything. It's like they did a huge thing. You could have wanted them to do more big things, but you can't say they didn't do any.
No. And of all the things they did, they took a team that already had an offense featuring Lindor, Encarnacion, and the GOAT, and they went and bolstered a part of the team that had been playing really, really poorly. And then at the actual deadline, it wasn't the splashiest move in the outfield, but they made a move in another position of need. So it's very hard. Like they checked all the boxes, and we still have I can't remember what they call it, the waiver wire deadline.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sometime in August that allows them to add another player who sneaks through waivers to trade, who's going to be eligible for the playoffs.
And that's how we got Jay Bruce last year. Yeah. That's not a completely meaningless time. It's not all Cocoa Crisp that you get in that time frame.
And Cocoa Crisp was meaningful too.
Right. Yeah, we're certainly going to add some players at that deadline, but I just think it's funny that I agree with everyone that the outfield is a disaster, and that's probably more of an off-season failure than a trade deadline one, but they still, didn't fix it. They certainly added to it. But it's just funny how it becomes this own sport and how mad we get after saying they need to make a move early, and then they make the move early, and then that is the reason that we're mad at them again once the deadline hits. Like if they had made the hand trade on the deadline, do you think most fans would have said that they were happy with the deadline?
Yes.
Absolutely, right?
Yep. Yeah, Hand and Simber, I think they would have been very happy that the Indians made a move, but because they made it early, it was like blowing your load early.
Right. Because we all wanted to have a really fun time on the trade deadline because it's a fun thing to follow. And we didn't get to have that because they didn't make a big trade. And so we're all mad.
Oh, do you ever wonder if we waste too much time on the regular season in baseball? Like we've kind of proven out that it's not obviously you need to play well enough to make the playoffs, but I just feel like we've learned so much from LeBron, even though he's now gone, that the regular season is just kind of meaningless. I mean, even the Indians 2 years ago that made the World Series, there's no reason that team ever should have made the World Series.
Right. No, I 100% agree. Like the regular season really is mostly meaningless, especially in like this situation where the division is this bad and we're good enough that we have this kind of a lead. Like it doesn't feel like we're really any chance we're going to lose this. In years where, it's closer, it's a little bit more exciting. But even then, it takes until August, September for it to really feel exciting.
You know who ruined it for me was John Steiner. I can't remember what the number was, but he said to me that, every team wins 60 and loses 60, and it's what you do with the other 30 I'm sorry, my math sucks tonight. But anyway, it's what you do with the rest of them. Like, pretty much every team wins 60 and loses 60.
Right.
Or whatever that number was. And it just, for my money, if some sports don't have enough games and it's too small a sample size, baseball has too big a sample size.
And it makes it boring to talk about because on a game-to-game basis, it just doesn't really matter. And it takes like a month before anything, like, okay, Brantley's been struggling for a while. It's probably now time to start talking about it a little bit. But how long it takes to get to that being an actual talking point, and you can't just pick one game. There's always a couple games throughout the year that people say is this huge, turning point, or this is the rock bottom, or this is it, this is the nail in the coffin, and it's like June, and it's very clearly not that. And it's not really fun that it's like that. It's not fun that you can't take anything away from these games. I don't like, the extreme opposite of the NFL, where every game means probably too much, and one little thing can wreck your whole season. But baseball's the other side, where it just takes so much to actually matter that it's difficult to get worked up about any singular event.
Well, and it's also like basketball in that if the Cavaliers' rotation is 8 during the regular season, it might be 8 in the first round of the playoffs, but it's going to be 7 in the second round, and it's going to be 6 in the third round. And if you're lucky enough to get to the NBA Finals, you might see 7 players, 8 players play meaningful minutes in the box score by the end of any given game. And it's the same with baseball. They're going to reduce it down to 3, maybe 4 starters. If you see a 4th starter in the playoffs, sometimes some series you don't even see the second, the third. So the team that we're watching and commenting on and panicking about is not even reminiscent of the one that's going to play the most meaningful pitches, at bats, and whatever else in the playoffs.
And it's also Jose Ramirez is having one of the best seasons I can remember watching of any Indian. But if he has a cold week, or if he cools off a little bit in September, it's completely different. And I just feel like that happens so much in baseball, which
happened to him in the playoffs last year.
Right. And that happens so much where if he gets cold and all of a sudden has a bad playoff series, that doesn't change how amazing he was all season. It's just that baseball's really random, and sometimes you have a good week or a good month, and sometimes you don't. And it's hard to control when those happen. And I'm not saying you can't control them at all, but it makes it hard to evaluate, because what's happening now, even if it is an indication of how amazing of a season he's having, it doesn't mean he's going to do that in the playoffs. And I feel like in the other sports, everything's more projectable.
How much did you hate last year when people would try and present it logically that the Indians hurt themselves by winning 22 games in a row?
Oh, I know. But that's what you have to do with baseball, because there's no, you can't hold on to anything else. So you have to make up these things like, well,
fake
they're peaking
rules
too early. Right. They're peaking too early. That's an important thing. Or like this season, I could totally talk myself into, well, it's good. They want to peak in August and September. That doesn't make any sense. That's not a real thing. But there's not much else to evaluate, because everything, it's a long season where nothing matters because the sample size is so big, boiled down to a playoffs where nothing matters because the sample sizes are so small. Or everything matters, but it's not as controllable.
We've got to come up with a list of the top 10 most fake sports rules. Like you got to have a rim protector.
That is good. I like that. We're just evaluate all the stuff that we just pretend like really matters.
You can't start a draft pick at quarterback in his rookie year. Like you can't, or you can't play two quarterbacks. You can't. There are all these fake rules that aren't actually true, but people
I feel
convince
like,
themselves.
are we getting pretty close to that with tight ends having to block?
Yes.
Like, does that really matter?
The other one, and I hate to say this one because I'm not a real football guy. I know the Browns are my primary thing that I comment on, but I never played football. I never played in the offensive line. I never played quarterback behind the offensive line. But with quarterbacks spreading the ball around and offenses spreading out the way they do, and 3 and 4 wide receivers and running backs splitting out, we still treat left tackle like it's the all-world thing because we had Joe Thomas. I don't think left tackle matters as much as it used to.
Oh no, I agree with that 100%. And like, but that ruins the movie The Blind Side, and we all kind of liked it. So I feel like we have like 5 more years before that runs out.
Well, I got a thing for Sandra Bullock, and that's just the way it is.
So maybe yours is more than 5 years. Maybe you got to retire that take for a little bit longer.
So I can't believe I thought of this just now, but it's another thing that happened behind the scenes at Waiting for Next Year, because I think for some reason we were talking about Friends, and Jennifer Aniston came up, and growing up for me, she was like the gold standard of pretty celebrity females. Because we all watched Friends, and then she did the Rolling Stone cover where she showed a blurry version of her butt, and like it was like a whole thing. Jennifer Aniston was one of those it type girls of our age, my age, and you're younger than I am, but you're not that much younger than I am. But it made me think about like when I was a kid, and my dad would say, Liz Taylor, she was something to behold back then. And to me, she was just like a weird old lady. And Jennifer Aniston doesn't look like Liz Taylor when my dad was like, hey, by the way, Liz Taylor was really attractive. Like, Jennifer Aniston still looks amazingly beautiful. But I wonder, because we're surrounded by people who are much, much, much younger than us in the behind the scenes at Waiting for Next Year. Do they like roll their eyes at us when we bring
100%. 100%. What, she's 49, right?
I know.
Yeah, there's a 100% chance that we have reached that age where everyone's rolling their eyes. I mean, you and I have already had this because we've been at concerts together where everyone has rolled their eyes at us, where we look like somebody's dad waiting to take them home. So this isn't new for you and I. But yes, I 100% think that happened at Waiting for Next Year.
Nobody said it, by the way. Congrats to them for not like calling us out.
They kind of let us have our moment.
Those guys with gray hair.
She was like the celebrity where she wasn't even like your celebrity crush, because she was just like everyone's celebrity crush.
Even the girls. Like, the girls wanted her hair.
Right. I accidentally, she's going to smack me for this. My wife came home with a bad haircut a couple of years ago. I was like, oh, it kind of looks like to Rachel. This is like 2016 or something. And I might have been the most insulting thing I've ever said to her.
Wow. Why? Because the reference was 14 years old?
Yes. She was furious. That did not help the situation.
Yeah, that's... Although, I think and maybe this is just me being dumb or as dumb as you, but I think that could have gone 50-50. Like, I'd be mad if I got in trouble for saying that.
Oh yeah, I had no idea. It was one of those like completely blindside. Like, thought I was doing the right thing, and very, very much learned I was not.
Now I know what the haircut was.
I don't think there's any pictures that exist.
I bet not.
They're all burned.
That's funny. All right. Yeah.
Speaking of pictures,
go ahead.
How weird is it that we all just have thousands and thousands of pictures on our phones and our computers? And like, I always wonder if I'm ever going to look at those again. Like, as great as it is to have that ability, when you used to print out pictures, there was like a stack of them, and it was easy to go through them, and you would look through them, and you could see everything. I feel like now the way digital is, we have them and we store them, and it's wonderful. But when was the last time like you looked through pictures from 5 years ago that you took with your phone?
So first of all, I'm good about clearing them off, so I don't keep them on my phone. I upload them, and then I look at them all the time once they're uploaded. So I think I do a pretty good job.
See, I don't at all. Like once they hit my computer, once I take them off my phone, they just kind of disappear from me. Like they're saved somewhere. But I have, when you're sitting there, you're like, all right, everybody pose, and you take 14 pictures of the same pose, hoping one of them is good.
Yeah.
I feel like that we do that, and then it's really hard to go back because you have thousands of pictures that are actually like 10 pictures, just 14 versions of every single one of them.
But I actually think it's going to work out great. I think I think it's going to be really useful for our kids. Like I took pictures a lot growing up, and I never saw any of them because they weren't anywhere where I could find them. But I think it's going to provide so much extra context, and it's going to reinforce memories. I don't know. That's what I'm thinking.
I feel bad for my kids because like half of the pictures on my phone that I upload are just like screenshots I took of like some stupid picture I found or a tweet or something like that. And
Oh,
like,
I'm
Dad,
also really good at clearing those out.
oh, see, I was like, Dad, like, why do you have Rajay Davis's 2015 stats saved on your phone? Those are important for me at some point for some reason.
I made a. I'm. I gotta find the weirdest picture I have on my phone. Because I wanted to like make a social media post out of it. I'm sure there's got to be one, but I have those too.
Yeah, and I never clear those out. I just upload everything, and then it's just or like screenshots of text, stuff like that, like just boring text. They're just like plans for the weekend, just so I remember something like that. My kids are just gonna be like, "Oh my god, Dad, I'm never looking through your pictures again."
But you never screenshot people on Snapchat like Dave Sterling, do you?
Oh, never. What happens in Snapchat stays. It's like the DMs. There should be a lock on it.
Is that still like a hard, fast rule, or is there acceptability amongst friends to do that kind of stuff?
For Snapchat or for DMs?
Oh, Snapchat.
I think there's some. I think it's acceptable. Some.
I don't think.
I certainly.
I don't think screenshotting DMs is ever okay.
No, that's never okay. But I certainly get this person took a screenshot thing quite a bit on Snapchat. So my friends are either terrible people or it's just fairly acceptable. And that's 50-50 for sure.
Well, half of them are Dave Sterling.
That's true. That's true. He just has his little album of snaps that he's received from me that he's going to use to blackmail me at some point in my life.
And then he'll always just say, "Hey, look, you friended me."
Yes, which is a fair point. I did make that mistake.
Oh, all right. Do we have any other ground that we forgot to cover? I feel like I'm missing something.
Let's see. Do we need to talk Browns at all? Or can we save that till we're deeper in camp?
I really don't think we need to talk about it. And I think we talked around it a little bit. When I told you that thing about how left tackle's not that important, I'm kind of mocking them moving Joel Bitonio over there.
Yeah, that's one of those. I get both sides of it because you don't want to take a position that's strong and make it weak and then have two weak positions, But if he's fine there and if they have a guy who can fill in at guard and be pretty good, then it makes sense. And I don't know that. I'm not there at camp. I don't know what's going on there. So if they think it can work, I'm sure it'll be fine.
Do you think?
You're not trying to win the Super Bowl, right?
I think everybody is, but no, not realistically. But at the same time, do you think that there's any chance that that front office made a lot of moves all year long to try and bolster that so that they wouldn't have to move him over there, and now they did. So is that causing a rift between the front office and the coaching staff?
Oh, I could see that. Did I read some quotes that Bitonio's not super excited about it?
He was hesitant or something, I guess.
Yeah, it's one of those where it's not that big of a deal in our world of just trying to evaluate what they're thinking, but it seems like it was a bigger deal in the world of if this happened a week into camp, then the coaches are clearly, obviously, not happy with the situation, and the player doesn't seem happy with the situation. So
how would they have handled it if Sashi Brown was still here?
Oh, it would be so bad. He would be vetoing so many random trades that would be overpaying for left tackles right now, like the AJ McCarron trade.
Oh, yeah.
I like to think that if he was here, that would just be like a regular thing.
It'd be like the like one of those recurring theme episodes on Perfect Strangers would be, Sashi,
Yes, they'd be trying to fax the
Hugh.
paperwork, and he'd like look over, and he'd have the plug. You need to unplug the fax machine or something.
Yeah, Balky Bartalkamus doesn't know how to work the fax machine. Nobody
Speaking of
understands.
old references.
Yeah, I know, right? Are you old enough to watch Perfect Strangers?
A little bit of it, not
Oh.
enough to like quote it or anything, but yeah, I've certainly seen some episodes.
It's time to stop the podcast. I feel sad now.
Why? Because we're so old. It's time for us to go to bed.
Oh, yeah. Dude, there was something about turning 39, and I've been dealing with all these like weird kind of like nagging sports injuries, just trying to jog and like do the stuff that I do. 39 has felt really old to me.
Really? Oh, that
Yeah,
scares
well,
me.
I turned 40 in February, so it's probably just, you know, me losing the mental game, but, no shocker there.
I just hit 35. For some reason, it feels like the other side. Like 34 still felt like I was part of the younger demographic, but like when 35 is part of a whole new world to me for some reason.
You're
like, it
no
feels like
longer
that's
in your early 30s, that's for sure.
right. Like all of a sudden, I was like, oh man, I better like. I need to think about like my career and my 401k and stuff. Like this is real. Like my life, like what's going on in my life is real now. I have to take this seriously.
I almost think that hitting 40 will make me feel better because it'll be like Y2K where the clock turned over and nothing bad happened. And I'll be
We're
like,
gonna have Y2 Craig.
Yeah. You just started something and I'm not happy about it. This is going to have legs and you just screwed me. Oh, I'm going
I'm
to delete
immediately
this.
logging onto Slack and getting all the waiting for next year guys in on this.
I'm deleting this off the podcast. It's not going to work. It's in your brain. Oh, Y2 Craig. That's hysterical. Oh. How old were you at Y2K?
Oh man. Like I remember I believe I was in high school. So like 17.
You must have been 17. I was 21 going on 22. And we were in Boston for New Year's that year. And when the clock struck, I started it. We were all hammered, of course, because it was New Year's Eve and I was 21. And we were at a house party. And when the clock turned over, I started the chant, "We're not dead. We're not dead." And that's how we rang in Y2K.
I remember one of my friends tried to like cut out the lights or do something to make it seem like something terrible had happened, but he like failed miserably at it. He just like turned off one light or something, and it was like
Why'd you turn off that lamp, stupid?
Yeah, but it was like a perfect representation of like what Y2K actually was, because we were all so scared it was going to be something real, and it was just like this really lame like nothingness after it happened, and it was pretty much his prank. I rung it in right.
Oh, I don't think I distracted you from Y2 Craig. All right, we gotta end this podcast. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. Thanks for making time late night, Jeff. It's been fun. Thanks for surviving your month off Twitter.
Barely.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next time. It's been the waitingfornextyear.com podcast.